show me this. JxmyHighroller. I thought it couldn't get any worse. Bin mal gespannt, was er da raushasselt. JxmyHighroller, die besten NBA-Videos, die man sich auf YouTube geben kann. Abfahrt. Michael Jordan was carried by the Bulls. What the fuck? Kobe's overrated. MJ had weak-ass comp in the finals. LeBron had a weak-ass comp in the playoffs. Ben Simmons is a jump shot away from being the most complete player in the league. That's crazy. Oder die Aussage ist wild. Kobe was never the best player of any of his championship. Wer war denn der beste Spieler bei den Lakers bei den letzten beiden, oder ja, bei den letzten beiden Championships von Kobe? Paul Gasol oder was? Ron Artest? Steroids should be mandatory? Ja gut, da bin ich vielleicht sogar für, Digga. Das wird die Liga sehr interessant machen. This 3-point line was a mistake. Oh yeah, yeah. I know we joke about LeBron not having teammates, but who the fuck is this? Michael Jordan, bum, path through, beat old ass Lakers, beat old ass Blazers, saved by Paxson, retired because his gambling debt his kid. Oha! Was? Retired because his gambling debt his kid, his father? Beat by Baby Shaq and Penny? Gary Payton injured, saved by Kerr, pushed off on Russell, retired because of normal plumbers to beat, came back and couldn't even make the playoffs. To this man.
The good old hot take. The necessary evil of the sports world. Through the good ones, the bad ones, and the downright atrocious ones. We once again find ourselves racking our brains, trying to figure out how some people come up with this nonsense. But today, I've done the brain racking for you, and found some of the hottest NBA takes on the internet. So, buckle up. This may be a bumpy ride. Today's video is brought to you by DraftKings. Brothers, it's that time of year. The NFL is back, and if seeing grown men absolutely obliterate each other for 3 hours at a time wasn't good enough, DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, is giving new customers an offer you just cannot refuse. Bet $5 on any NFL wager.
Warum zieht mir Werbung rein?
Plus with be sure to use code I did my with the NBA offseason creeping along, I did my reluctant but mandatory scrub through NBA social media in search for a new batch of hot takes. And to no surprise, what I found
would take Wall overstep any day of
was downright appalling. Now, I'm no expert or anything, and I've definitely had my fair share of bad takes, but some of y'all should seriously have your accounts deactivated for the absolute tomfoolery y'all are posting on these pages. And after sifting through hundreds of takes, here's some of the best and worst that I came across. Now, this first take is from a fan who says that you need to be athletic to play in the NBA, and I cannot agree more with this take. Now, some of you are probably thinking, of course you have to be athletic to be a professional athlete, Einstein, but people will often use players like Stephen Curry, Luka Doncic, Duncan Robinson, and Kyle Anderson to prove the point that skill and size alone can earn you a spot in the NBA. And I think the key here is relativity. Sure, relative to other NBA players, these guys are not very athletic. But that's because their peers are some of the best athletes in the world. Compared to normal people, even the most unathletic NBA players are amazing athletes. For example, the average man has a vertical leap of about 17 inches. Duncan Robinson, the three-point specialist who doesn't dare take a step inside the paint, has a 33-inch max vert. That's double the average Joe. Luka Doncic, the guy who kills defenses with his craftiness, not his athleticism, has a 38-inch max vert. And Stephen Curry, the poster child for what you can accomplish
Luka Doncic hat eine 38-inch vert?
in sports without being an incredible athlete, has a 36-inch vertical leap. Even the most seemingly unathletic NBA players are
Das glaube ich irgendwie mit Luka nicht.
still top-tier athletes. It's just that when they're surrounded by giant superhumans, they tend to look a bit ordinary. But the other aspect of this that no one really talks about is that athleticism goes far beyond jumping high and running fast. Hand-eye coordination, spatial awareness, agility, these are all crucial elements of being a great athlete. For example, take Trae Young. Doesn't really fit the bill for a typical super athlete in terms of explosiveness, but his dexterity, coordination, stamina, mobility, and many other components of his game make him tremendously athletic. So, yes, you do in fact need to be a good athlete to play in the NBA. And even the most mundane players in the league are super athletes relative to the rest of us. Now this next take actually
Oder jetzt mal ohne Spaß, wer das nicht glaubt, der ist auch einfach hart am Leben vorbeigeschrammt. Wer denkt, dass in der NBA irgendwelche, wie die Leute das schon sagen, Plumber, irgendwelche, wie sagt man denn? Was ist Super Mario nochmal? Ihr wisst, wie ich meine, irgendwelche komische Handwerker spielen, Digga, das stimmt ja nicht.
comes from an NBA player. And as crazy as it sounds, it's
Was war?
actually not too far from the truth. Last season, Karl Anthony
Ich bin schon 8,5 Stunden.
Towns came out and said that he is the greatest big man shooter of all time.
Was mit Dirk Nowitzki? What the
Fact.
fuck?
And immediately
What the
fans
fuck?
were not happy about this.
Yeah, man.
I mean, with big men like Dirk Nowitzki, Peja Stojakovic, and DeMarcus Cousins, Cat still has a lot of work to do to earn the title of greatest shooting big man ever. Right? Let's look at the numbers. Here's a chart of some of the most prolific big man shooters in NBA history.
Aber das kann böse werden.
And amongst some of the greatest big man shooters the game has ever seen, it appears that Al Horford, Chris
Wer ist denn Detlef Schrempf? Ist das Deutscher? Das ist ein Deutscher! Ehemaliger Basketballspieler. Der seit dem Verlust seiner deutschen Staatsangehörigkeit, was? Lol, einfach ein Deutscher.
Bosh and Dirk Nowitzki
Er ist leider, ja, das denke ich mir auch, Cat ist wahrscheinlich wirklich durch die Quoten wahrscheinlich besser. Ja, das Ding, man muss dazu aber auch sagen, es ist eine andere Zeit. Die Leute werfen viel mehr Dreier, als es damals war, ne? Dirk hat ja auch, keine Ahnung, ich glaube 3 Dreier pro Game geworfen, hat dann aber dafür 5, 6, 7, 8 Midrange pro Game geworfen und die auch zu einer guten Percentage.
are the best of
Also meiner Meinung nach ist Dirk Nowitzki trotzdem der beste Shooting Big, der ever
the
existiert.
best. And
Das
then
musst du,
there's
glaube
Matt
ich, auch als
Bonner,
Deutscher sagen.
who lives in his own stratosphere. Karl Anthony Towns falls right here. So he's certainly one of the best big man shooters, but he's
Matt
not number
Bonner?
one. But this graph only covers mid-range shots. What about three-pointers? Well, that chart would look like this. And aside from Davis Bertans, who gets paid $16 million a year to literally stand on the three-point line for 20 minutes a game, the best big men three-point shooters of all time include Ryan Anderson, Peja Stojakovic, and Matt Bonner. Karl Anthony Towns is right here. One of the best all time, but not the best.
alles klar.
Now this fan, like many others I've seen, says that Kyrie Irving is better than Steph
Curry mit Kyrie Irving zu vergleichen, das ist hart.
Curry at virtually every aspect of basketball other than shooting. Therefore, he's a better player than Steph is. First of all, no. Second,
Stop it.
this logic seems to make sense if player A
Das ist der Unterschied. Da hast du vollkommen recht, Isaiah, Digga. Dirk hat sein Shooting auf der größten Stage unter Beweis gestellt. Und vor allem vor den schlimmsten Spielern. Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh und LeBron James. Prime.
is better at most things compared to player B, then player A, by default, must be the better player. But these side-by-side comparisons almost always lack one thing: context. For example, take these two players. Player A is better at nearly everything compared to player B. Passing, playmaking, rebounding, defending, finishing. Player A can do it all. So, according to the logic used in these comparisons, we must assume
Sag mir jetzt bitte nicht, dass Ben Simmons auf der linken Seite ist und rechts ist... Oder wer ist das rechts?
player A is much better than player B. Except player A
Ist das hier dieser Weaves-Typ von den
Ben
Lakers?
Simmons.
Austin
And player
Reeves?
B is first team All-NBA Devin Booker. Similar to the Kyrie versus Steph comparison, using extremely general categories to assess players with zero context is a recipe for disaster. Basketball has a lot of nuance. It's dependent on situations, circumstances, and systems, all of which give context to a player's impact and ability. As incredible as Kyrie's handles are, they aren't nearly as impactful as Steph's ability to space the floor with his shooting. In fact, if history tells us anything, it's that being extremely good at a few things can often be far more valuable than being good at everything.
Oh Spaß, was seid ihr lieber? Also ich sag ganz ehrlich, als NBA-Spieler wäre ich lieber gut in 2, 3 Sachen, anstatt ein Allrounder zu sein und nichts wirklich hundertprozentig gut zu können.
If you took away everything from Steph's game, aside from just his shooting ability and high basketball IQ, he would still be a Hall of Fame talent. But if you took away Ben Simmons' passing ability, he'd be a 6', 10" Patrick Beverley. These two aspects of the game hold different values to different players. So to compare them side by side like they are equivalents doesn't accurately determine anything. At most, these kinds of comparisons might help you decide who's the better all-around player, but if being good, not great, at most things on the court determine who is the best player, then Draymond Green would be a 4-time Finals MVP right now. But he's not. Now this next take is one of the more interesting takes I've heard recently. This NBA fan says that the top 8 players in the league going into this season are the best top 8 players the league has ever had at any given time, making this era the best era in NBA history. Those top
Das ist ein harter Hot-Take, Digga. Würde ich aber wahrscheinlich nicht so unterschreiben. Weil ich glaube, es waren zur gleichen Ära Michael Jordan, Larry Bird und Magic Johnson, Isaiah Thomas, Patrick Ewing auch alle in einer Liga.
Top 8 players being LeBron, Durant, Giannis, Kawhi, Steph, Jokic, Luka, and Embiid. And I gotta say, that is one hell of a top 8. Every one of these players, aside from Luka and Embiid, either has an MVP or a Finals MVP. I'd say out of the top 8, you've got roughly 5 top 30 players of all time. Without a doubt, this is one of the most talented and accomplished group of players in NBA history. But is it really the best? Well, there's definitely been worse years in the NBA, like throughout the 70s and early 2010s, where maybe 3 or 4 players were head and shoulders above everyone else. But there's also been years where the league has featured a large group of some of the greatest players all in one season. Like in 1996, when the top 8 players in the league consisted of Michael Jordan, David Robinson, Patrick Ewing, Charles Barkley, Gary Payton, Hakeem Olajuwon, John Stockton, and Karl Malone. This is a stacked group of 8 and one of the most exciting eras in NBA basketball. But I think we can do better. What about the 2003 NBA season, when the top 8 players in the league were Shaq, Kobe, Duncan, Garnett, McGrady, Dirk, Iverson, and Jason Kidd? This group contains 3 top 10 players in league history and 2 more players who are generally considered top 20 all time. But I still think there's one NBA season that tops this one in terms of all-time talent. Back in 1988, the league was shifting from one era to the next. And within these 2 clashing generations of basketball, fans witnessed what I believe to be the most loaded group of players the league has ever seen. Michael Jordan, Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, Karl Malone, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Hakeem Olajuwon, Moses Malone, Isaiah Thomas, and Charles Barkley. That's 9 players.
Patrick Ewing wurde doch genauso mit Michael Jordan gedraftet. Der wurde einfach nicht mehr reingenommen, hat nicht gereicht, Digga.
All of them generally considered top 25 greatest to ever play the game in the league, all in the same season. And outside of an aging Kareem,
das wäre auch die Decade gewesen, die ich gepickt hätte von den Seasons. Auf jeden Fall.
Every single one of these players was in their prime in 1988.
Und die Top 8 ist auf jeden Fall besser. Ist es nicht sogar eine Top 9? Ist eine Top 9. Die sind auf jeden Fall besser als die Top 9, die wir heute haben. Definitiv, Bruder.
That's 5 consensus top 10 players of all time playing in the same season. Now, if we compare these 2 groups of players, I honestly think it's not even close. But only for the simple fact that the 2022 group has a handful of young players
Curry, der sparkt überall raus mit seinem
who still have a lot of time left to add to their resume. And I do think that this 2022 group does have the potential to be the greatest collection of players in one season. Only time will tell how this group will pan out. Ask again in about 10 years and we'll have an answer for you. But for now, 1988 remains by far the most loaded year in NBA history. Now, our last take for this video has virtually become a matter of fact over the years, but I'd like to make the case against it. This fan asks the question, when it's all said and done, which LeBron-led super team will be viewed as his best? Which means by default, he believes LeBron has been on multiple super teams.
Ja, das ist schon mal eine schwierige Aussage von vornherein. Weil die meisten werden wahrscheinlich nur sagen, dass er nur bei den Heat ein super Team hatte, weil das bei den Lakers hat nie funktioniert. Das war auch ein super Duo. Bei den Cavs vielleicht, aber Kyrie Irving ist im Endeffekt gedraftet worden, ne? Und Kevin Love hat auch nie, er hat irgendwer die Chris Bosh-Rolle eingenommen, ohne Chris Bosh Swag.
And as popular as this take is, it's not a good one. LeBron has really only been a part of one super team, and that was the Miami Heat. The Cavaliers from 2014 through 2017 were not a super team. And if you even say super team and 2022 Lakers in the same sentence, you're a sick individual.
Ja, ich hätte auch eher die Era mit Anthony Davis und LeBron.
When the Cavs assembled their big three, the potential of this team and the public perception of this team far exceeded their actual ability. By the time this Cavs team won a title, they had one superstar, one all-star, and one fringe all-star player. If this is the criteria for a super team, then that would mean that the 2021 Jazz were a super team, the 2021 Nets were a super team,
ja, aber die waren doch wirklich ein
the
super
2021 Bucks were a super team, so were the 2022 Warriors, the 2022 Celtics, the 2022 Suns,
Ja, okay, es wird
the
weird.
2021 76ers, and the list keeps going and going.
Aber viele von den Teams wurden wirklich als Superteams gehandelt, ne? Auch wenn sie alle nicht überzeugt haben, aber sie wurden als Superteam gehandelt.
And going. In fact, if we just take the box plus minus of the Cavs' big three and compare it to teams over the last few seasons, you can see that they were good, but far from some all-time super team. You'd never look at Embiid, Simmons, and Tobias Harris and call them a super team. You'd never look at Kawhi, Paul George, and Montrezl Harrell and call them a super team. You'd never look at Giannis, Middleton, and Drew Holiday and call them a super team. And yet, the combination of LeBron,
Warte, was war das? 2020er Clippers, Paul George, Kawhi Leonard und Montrezl Harrell? Also, das sind alles Duos, ne? Montrezl Harrell ist kein Superstar.
Kyrie, and Kevin Love were on this level by the
Erzählt
time
immer
they
ein
won a
Spieler.
title together. And if you even consider the 2022 Lakers with LeBron, Westbrook, and AD as a super team, just stop. We know what you're doing. LeBron has played on a handful of good teams throughout his career. Some of them were great, but he's only been a part of one super team. And unfortunately, that's all the racking my brain can handle in one sitting. Make sure to leave your NBA hot takes in the comments below. Of course, the hotter.
Jungs, gute Nacht und ich hoffe, ihr träumt was schön von mir, Lul. Ich hoffe, deine Mom träumt von mir. Arne, grüß mal schön, ja? Schönen Abend wünsche ich noch, Bruder. Kuss, dass du noch da warst,
The
ja?
better. Hope you all enjoyed. And as always,
Wieder ein
until
sehr,
next
sehr gutes Video. Warte mal, my hot take, if Drew Holiday played in the 90s, he been seen arguably the greatest defensive point guard of all time by now, because the 90s was so much more defense orientated. Haben wir auch heute in der Jordan Challenge gesehen, by the way, but because of the offensive heavy era Drew plays in now, he will be underrated as a defender in the grand scheme of things, since it's so much harder these days to play that kind of defense. Das ist vielleicht sogar ein guter Hot Take. Sehr, sehr gutes Video von ihm, ohne Spaß.